You should completely ignore Overwatch 2 tier lists. What's up, everybody? My name is Coach Mills, and in this video, we're going to be talking about tier lists and why they are detrimental to your development as a player, and they're not needed in order to improve, and you should not follow them. Now, I'm not going to bash people that make tier lists because I make tier lists myself. I've literally fed my family with revenue from tier lists over the past 4 years. And while I think tier lists are incredibly entertaining, create good discussion and conversation for new players specifically, they can often lead them down the wrong path when taken as gospel. So we're going to break down 6 reasons why you should completely ignore tier lists, how they can actually be used to your benefit, and what you should do instead to decide what character to pick in Overwatch 2. Now, the first thing that you need to understand is that metas are based typically on high level or pro play. Now, not everyone uses this term, but I typically use the term most effective tactics available, meaning that meta is the best characters that you could play, the most played characters, and the best tactics and compositions at any given time. Here's the problem. In Overwatch, the most effective tactics at a pro level does not necessarily mean they will be the most effective tactics even at a Grandmaster level, or a plat level, or a casual level. Every single person's individual skill level is going to be different, and especially in pro play, when you have set strategies, cohesion, high levels of mechanical skill and teamwork, you're gonna have a very different meta than the average meta in the game. We'll touch more on this point later. Another reason that you should probably be ignoring a lot of these Overwatch 2 tier lists is players often completely misevaluate new characters. And this is not an Overwatch specific thing, this is a game specific thing. New characters typically get way overhyped or underhyped because players either have the presumption that they're overpowered, or the character is hard to use, people think it's bad. But over time, players get a lot better at that character, and that character becomes stronger and stronger. There's either a slow build and gain in pick rate, or there's a huge correction where people realize that a character isn't actually as good as it initially seemed like it. While I think that it's good to analyze a character and see where it's going to fit in any given situation, it's also important to understand that these very, very early tier lists that happened before ranked mode is really even played out, and there isn't that much consistent play in ranked right now. It's going to be way off, and the new characters in particular being added into the mix, there's very little hero mastery and there's very little data to actually give us some sort of guide as to how strong some of these characters really are. Next up, we do got to talk about streamers and pros being biased. Nearly every early tier list is typically way off, and it comes down to the fact that most of these streamers are way too damn good. Like, a lot of them are completely cracked, and I think that's a good thing. We like to watch people that are very good at the game, but they do see a lot of this from a very high level lens, a Grandmaster top 500 lens, which is good, but there needs to be a certain level of caveat there for the average player, where the majority of people are not going to have a Widowmaker that is going to be able to hit half of the shots that she takes and just consistently get kills, and they might think that Widowmaker is very strong, or a character that has a very high skill ceiling is very strong, when the average player isn't going to feel that, isn't going to actually resonate with that at all. It's not going to be their experience. So it can be one of the dangers of trying to take a tier list from a high level player or a streamer and applying it to your own gameplay. The next thing that you need to understand, and this is one of the most important things about this topic, the knowledge and skill gap in Overwatch is absolutely huge. There's a very, very high skill ceiling overall in the game, and that means that in the majority of ranks, you can literally play anything. Even quote-unquote poor meta characters can be used to climb all the way to GM because of the individual skill difference, the decision-making that you're having in each and every game, and the knowledge gap. You can make every single character have an impact. And often the true way in which you climb has to do with how little mistakes you're making, not necessarily the plays your character is making. And you cannot make mistakes on every single hero. To give you an example of this, in Overwatch 1, Genji was one of the weakest characters in the game for the majority of Overwatch. Ever since Brig was released, who was a very strong counter, and the prevalence of armor and CC became more and more relevant, Genji was a character that was very, very weak and wasn't seeing any pro play, and at the high levels on all the tier lists, Genji was very bad. But ask the majority of players in Overwatch 1 and they'll tell you that Genji was one of the most busted characters in the game through the entire life cycle. This is because the skill ceiling on Genji is so potentially high that a really good Genji could absolutely roll every single rank until players properly learned how to counter him, and that was only done with a certain level of teamwork and ability mastery that wasn't found until you reached Masters or Grandmaster. This meant that Genji was a character perfectly capable of climbing you and very important for you to learn how to properly counter, but because every single guide and tier list was mainly made based on high-level play, that kind of content wasn't readily available. Now, you might be asking the question, okay, tier lists are still fun and entertaining, and they still tell me what is being played, so what can I use a tier list for? What is a tier list good for? And the first thing that a tier list can be useful for is to gauge the percentage of heroes you will face. It's very likely that a tier list will often reflect a pick rate. And you have to understand that Genji is probably going to be a character that is played a lot. He would be put in the S tier in most of these tier lists. So knowing that you will have to face up against Genji a lot will better help you prepare against a Genji, will help you understand that that is the character that you're going to have to match up against, and it will give you a plan. Let's say you're playing an untraditional pick. You should have a plan up against many of these meta characters because you're going to have to face them over and over again. And if you can develop a playstyle or a plan that helps you shut down that character that you're going to run in a large percentage of the time, that will directly translate into more wins over time and a high win rate. Now, this leads me into the last section of the video, which is what you should do instead of adhering to these tier lists 100%. You need to find out how the characters that you like to play fit into the quote-unquote meta of your rank or the rank around which you play. Ask yourself these questions. What characters does your hero main combo with and work well with? That can better help you decide what characters to play and how to play your character optimally with other characters that are going to work well with them. Let me give you a perfect example. Let's say you're a tank main. You can actually enable different types of DPS depending on the tank you're picking. A character like Sigma, for instance, can enable some hit scan characters to work with you, prevent enemies from pushing you, and shoot through your shield. Someone like Cassidy, for instance. But let's say your other hero is Winston, and Winston works incredibly well with Sombra, Tracer, and Genji in a dive composition. And learning how to properly dive with them and enable them is going to be a way that you get exponentially more wins over time. And I can definitely make a video about how to do all of that if you're interested. Please smash the like, subscribe, and let me know down below so I know exactly what to make next. The last thing that you should do instead is find out what characters are difficult for your hero to play versus and how you can overcome it. We talked about that previously, and it's a really important point to reiterate because if you're going up against Genjis in half of your games and you're getting farmed by them on your main, if you don't learn to adapt or play in a way that makes it much harder for those Genjis to get value, you will have a very low win rate over time. If you can do these things, you can find success on any hero main that you want, and it doesn't matter what's on a tier list, and it doesn't matter what's in the meta. But please smash that like, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.